welcome back to Cast Me to Hell with me, Seb.
And with me, Robbie.
And this week we are looking at Shaun of the Dead for its 20th anniversary.
Yeah, it's it is a classic, let's be honest, man.
I mean, we are British. Therefore, this is a British classic, and it's kind of mad in my head to think actually 20 years.
Yeah,
because I remember this.
I
film.
remember.
I remember. Like this is one of those first anniversary ones where I feel like I fully like. I remember seeing it I didn't see it in the cinema.
No.
I wasn't quite old enough for that, but I remember seeing the poster in the cinema.
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
Because obviously this was released around the same time as Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
Because I think I've said this one before once, a long time ago, but literally I remember watching like a chat show like Graham Norton. And on the Graham Norton, they had some people on there, and they were like, "I'm here, the Graham Norton show," and they were like, "Oh yeah," and they're here, and they were talking about like someone was talking a thing, and you were like, "Yeah," and and obviously with Shaun of the Dead, and I remember being so like a child, so cocksure of myself, going, "He just got that wrong." I was like, it's called Dawn of the Dead. He's fucked up.
Yeah,
he's fucked up. I didn't realise what Shaun of the Dead was yet. I just heard, but I knew Dawn of the Dead was coming out, or I knew the remake of that was coming out. So I was like, he's fucked up. It's called Dawn of the Dead, not Shaun of the Dead. So I literally like there in my head, I was like, oh right, this is actually a film. I was like, okay. I was like, and I think I remember when I first saw a first clip of it, I was like, hey, that's a bit shit. Yeah, feel like that's not like Dawn of the Dead, and then. Yeah,
I remember going to the cinema, and it was the old cinema before it had the big refurbishment and moved.
Yeah, the one I worked in.
The one you worked in, and it had when it had like the plastic screens.
Yeah,
that they would insert the posters.
Yeah,
I remember seeing that one, and then we rented it from Blockbusters.
Yeah,
on classic DVD home video, and it was like it had like a zombie moaning in the background, and then it had all of the zombies at the door, and the menu when you like scrolled through it was a cricket bat, and then when you pressed it, it hit the one. Yeah, and I remember watching it so much, man.
Oh, man. It was non-stop. That like the watching it and
everywhere.
The thing is, this is one of those films. There were certain films. This is before This is before we got to our Netflix stages.
Yeah.
Life. This is before streaming and stuff like that. This is when you went out and you spent 20 quid on a DVD because you're either like, I want to fucking see that film. You know what I mean? Or you'd be renting it and you'd keep that film for like 2 weeks because you're like, I'm not giving you it back.
I'm watching it every night.
Yeah, and you're watching it non-stop. This was at that period when you were still in the renting, or literally you were going out and literally buying. Like I think I went out. I think my grandma bought me this out DVD. We were like, what, we're going to watch that? I was like, we should get Shaun of the Dead. Like, I don't think I'd seen it before. That's the first time I think we bought the DVD, so I actually had it from the first time I saw it. And I persuaded my grandma to buy it, saying, yeah, you're like that. I think I bought like 3 horror films. And she was like that. So I was like, we got Shaun of the Dead, and then took it home. And I mean, it brings me joy thinking of that time, because it literally is just like, I think that was the peak of when I was probably at the beginning of like, that was like when I was like collecting like DVDs and stuff like that, and I loved that. I loved that time, having all these films and collecting all these horror films, and that was like when my first peak. I think around that time, 2000, the 2000s. I think I went to like on holidays to like Florida in like 2002, and I don't know, but once after I went to Florida, and I think I saw like Attack of the Clones and Spider-Man, like in America, that proper surged my like proper like love of like film in general. But then after that, I kind of found horror films, and then it's like just built so much from then. But that period was when I was like, all my money that I would have, or anyone else's money that I could take, was on like more and more DVDs and films and horror films and stuff like that. But there was so different about seeing films at that point in time.
There was. I mean, when we said we'd do Shaun of the Dead, a couple of days ago, and I was kind of thinking like, it's coming up to the 20th anniversary. And I was like, oh man, like I've seen Shaun of the Dead like so many times, and I was
more times than I even know. I think.
Yeah, and part of me was like, I don't want to fucking watch it. I was like, I don't want to watch it. I don't want to talk about it. It's a film that like it's just burned into your brain.
This is that like my long tangent there, where I actually had a point originally, which was. So I had this on DVD and watched it a million times. But the thing is, everyone always had these films like straight away. So there were certain films that got releases and then they were there, but then they went on to things like ITV on UK. And I mean, Jesus Christ, ITV2 lived on probably still does live on this film. Like, it literally was on you would turn on the TV, Shaun the Dead's on again. Shaun the Dead's on again. And yeah, sometimes I would be like, oh, but this is really good. So you'd start watching it and you get drawn in and you'd watch it again and watch it again. And you're like, I've literally probably watched that DVD like 100 bloody times at some point. You know what I mean? So I've seen this film so many times, but coming to this film, like you just said, I was just thinking in my head, I was like, I don't think I need to watch this film. I know this film. Like, I know this back and forth, but I want to watch it because I feel like I will have forgot stuff and I won't remember things. But there was a part of me that was like... and I was really worried that one of us would come in and have like a reaction and be like, it's not actually as good as I remember. And I feel like that would be a major disservice because I think you know that this is a great film.
Oh, yeah.
But it's one of those films where you've just watched it to death.
And that's it. And I think... what happened with me is I almost did a 180 on watching it. I went from being like, you know what, I don't really want to like watch this. Like, I've watched it so much. Like, we all know it's a great film. But then watching it, like you said, it brought me back to, you know, being 2004, being 12 years old. I can distinctly remember we were doing like renovating my brother's bedroom at the same time, and his bed was in the middle of the room, and we watched it like sat on the end of his bed, and it brought me back to that. But then there was something different. Like, I think this is probably the first time I've watched the film in like 10 years, and watching it when you're like a teenager or when you're 20 years old, it's a lot different to watching it when you're kind of like Shaun's age and you're very much like in a like your life is like in that strange phase where like Rafe Spall is one of like,
Rafe Spall's in it and he says he's like 17 years old and you're like, Jesus Christ, Rafe Spall is like fucking some old actor. You know, you feel like an old actor now.
He's like he's a big actor. He's a big actor now. But you look at him and he's like a kid, and you get Shaun, who's like somehow is technically an adult, but then you have like he's awkward around Phil, you know, Philip, his stepdad, and then he doesn't really have his life together. But then there's people who are like young who look up at him, and it got me thinking like
it's even, to be fair, it's even like Bill Nighy. Like Bill Nighy, this is like before the Bill Nighy resurgence.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Bill Nighy went from like did this and wasn't like huge, and then he did Love Actually and went fucking and then he went fucking Davy Jones and you know all that stuff. You know, he like shot up, but a lot of the actors in this film was like, you know, this wasn't like a major like huge like it wasn't tiny because it was about 6 million budget or something like that. So it wasn't tiny because obviously they had Edgar Wright's TV show Spaced before it that helped, like, which was a somewhat of a hit, but not like a major one.
It was more kind of a cult.
It was like a Channel 4 kind of one. You know, and then when they say it's a hit, it's not like an international BBC hit or something like that. It's like a Channel 4 hit. Like in the UK, people liked it, people enjoyed it, but found it a bit weird, a bit eccentric, like basically like most comedies around that time. Channel 4 was pumping out great stuff. Like, it was great for a certain audience, but older audiences would be like, what the fuck is this?
It was a turn of the millennium,
nerdy,
like,
techno, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was a very kind of like counterculture, weird humour thing.
Yeah.
And obviously they did the Spaced episode with Resident Evil.
Yeah.
And he, you know, I keep wanting to say Shaun, but Simon Pegg, another Gloucester boy, you know, oi, shout out. You know, he
give us that shout out.
he went to school in the next, you know, village or borough next to us, as you would say.
Now he's friends with Tom Cruise.
You know. But yeah, you know, he plays, you know, he starts hallucinating about a zombie invasion, and that's kind of where they kind of got the genesis of the idea from. But it's really great because when I forget just how much Edgar Wright does this whole like foreshadowing and how he builds things.
Oh, this is one of those things where it's a film where, you know, this is a film that surprised me. I've got to be honest. If you told someone at that point in time, oh, this is a British zombie film, you know, it's a comedy, it's a horror, I gotta be honest. I think people would have gone. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's okay, but it sounds a bit shit, doesn't it? Like it's a British. You're trying to do a British, you're trying to do one of those spoofy films, are you? Doing a spoof, and that's the problem. And if anything, I'd say to start with, before people had caught on, that is what a lot of people thought this was, like a spoof film.
Yeah,
they thought it was a spoof, and therefore they thought, oh, it's like a scary movie or something. It's not really taking something seriously, as good as that is in its format. But it also reminds you, is that Edgar Wright is a far better filmmaker than that, and he actually, this being his first film, but this being his first, full-on film, he knocks that out of the park.
Oh man!
Because he's got such a knowledge of cinema, and and Simon Pegg is as well. They are proper film nerds. They are the amount of horror kind of references in this film, and just general nerdy references in this film is like packed full. That they use shots and tracking shots and stuff that a film of this level at that time for a guy who came from a TV show to this shouldn't have. Like, this film is far better made than it had any right to be.
And watching it like with my now brain, watching it as I am now as somebody who understands and has a lot more like reverence for the genre.
As your life has now passed you by.
As my life has passed me by like Shaun. You realise just like how much like homage it pays to things. Like the opening, it opens up with that weird sound that, George A. Romero was using.
Yeah.
That kind of weird droning. And it does that thing of like, playing with your expectations, and there's like the bits where it's playing a lot of like the I can't remember what exactly it is, but in the credit scene where it's showing like the people at the bus stop, and it's showing the guys walking down the alley, and it's playing that song. I feel it's not like Ghost. It's not the Specials Ghost Town, but it's something else.
Because that is in the film.
That's in the film.
That is what they're doing when it is the Specials Ghost Town, isn't it? When they go on the bus stop and stuff, because it's the.
No, it's something else.
Because when
it's
the
like
bus
more
door,
jangly one.
like when the bus door opens and stuff, it kind of matches in with the.
It's it's more of a jangly one, I think.
Is it? I think I thought it was Specials Ghost Town. That is like they kind of use the theme of it in the film quite a lot in this film.
Maybe they do later on, but I know it's like a certain jangly one. That's the one.
Yeah, that one.
That's the one.
Yeah. Which I think is a play on. I think it is. I think it's using that song. I think it's not the main part of the song, but there is a part of the song that has that kind of more part to it, a bit more upbeat part.
Maybe.
I'm sure throughout the film, like that's the main theme used is the Special Ghost Town is used, like, but he uses it as more of a orchestral kind of thing, which I think is clever because it's such a kind of it builds the film for a film that might not have quite had the budget to do such a good orchestral score when he's trying to imitate like the Romero scores and the Fulci scores and stuff like that, because again this has so many of those references, like the restaurant that he wants to call is called Fulci's. It has, like I said before, it has the gonk song like in the credits, and I think it plays in the background from Dawn of the Dead.
It plays the this is one that struck me this time watching it. But each time he's going, what's the plan? And he's like, pick up Phil, kill Liz, and then go here. It's playing the Dawn of the Dead theme from the Argento cut.
Oh yeah,
to play
that.
And I never noticed that before.
Yeah, this is the thing. It shows. That's why I think this rises above, because not only actually is it one where the comedy. Yes, after you've seen it like a million times, it's not quite the same. But the first time you watch the comedy, and you still know, the comedy is not only classic British comedy, but it's quite timeless comedy.
Yeah.
It's a comedy that is funny, and it works in the same way that, like Fawlty Towers or something. It just has a classicness to it that you can watch it, and you can be someone who wasn't of the time, and you watch it and go, yeah, that's funny. That's good. Like that's a good play. And if you love horror and you love zombie films, this is just a love letter to it.
Yeah.
It shows how much they have thought carefully about it and thought about it, and how like even the goofiest, silliest moments can still have quite a lot of. But that's actually really clever. Like that you don't realise, and I think general audiences who didn't know any of the you wouldn't have known any of this stuff, wouldn't realise as quite how clever this film is in certain parts.
And there's, going back to some of the writing, it has that kind of really kind of understated wit and quirk to it that Edgar Wright, especially in the three Cornetto films, is really kind of famous for. Like at the start when Liz is saying that like she wants them to change their life, and she's like, it's not because I don't like Ed, and she's like, sorry Ed, and then he's like, oh well, we're always coming here with David and Diana, and it's like, it's not like I don't like David and Di, and then he like looks sorry David and Di, and it's that thing of like it's kind of really quirky, but it's played so straight-laced, and that's another thing that I kind of find that I love about the film, is that his films, they very much, like how we were talking about The Fly last week. If you haven't watched it, go and check it out. If you haven't listened to it, go and check it out. And I haven't done my cheap plug, so if you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button and leave us a lovely review. Have to get that in there. He spends a lot of time building. First act is very much like slice of life almost. We go to the Winchester, we find out who like a lot of the players are, and then we get the scene that I love, which is like the single tracking shot of him, leaving the door. The doors open. You left the door open again. Yet again, little foreshadowing, and then he leaves. And you see, like, the homeless guy asks him for money, the guy kicking the ball.
Yeah, the kid kicking the ball.
The kid.
The guy in his wedding outfit. The guy in the shop who's dressed for the wedding. And
and then,
people in the car behind. Like, all of these people that, then later on, we see the exact same shot, don't we? Yeah. Which is amazing.
Yeah, and it's so well done. And I think that's, like, an iconic bit that I remember being young, everybody being, like, fucking loving it, you know? Yeah. And it's that thing of, like, slice of life, and then the surrealism kicks in, and he does that in all of the films. I haven't seen, to be honest, I haven't seen Last Night in Soho, so I don't really know what that's like.
No, I haven't seen that. I was just thinking that as well. I think that's the only Edgar Wright film I haven't seen, and to be honest, I don't think I've ever seen an Edgar Wright film I didn't like.
I haven't seen Baby Driver. That was him.
Baby Driver is really good. Yeah, Baby Driver is really good. I think I've always found so to enjoy in things. Baby Driver is like really good for the music. Like he plays it perfectly with that, which he does in this as well. To be fair, he uses certain music at certain times that just is so the Queen "Don't Stop Me Now" became iconic. Yeah, it's just one of those. Queen is iconic anyway for its use, but it just it literally this film was credited for basically shooting Queen back up into like. Oh yeah, we forgot how much we love that band.
Well, it was iconic, man.
Yeah, like that whole scene is amazing. Like obviously that's near the end of the film, kind of jumping ahead. But these are just scenes that like jump out in your mind as like that just works so well going along to it. The fact that they're kind of going along to the beat and stuff like that. Yeah. It's just funny, but it's also kind of like it has its own little, with the song being so good as it is, pumps you up anyway. It has
its own quirks. And then I actually I forgot just kind of like how kind of creepy there is actually an element of creep, particularly in that first part before the zombies are really revealed. It's almost it's really quite strange in the fact that we get a lot of like foreboding, we get a lot of hints about how the story's going to play out, how things are going to happen, we get signs that things are going wrong. However, it's almost, at least I feel like, once you get past that and you get to almost where the horror should kick in, the comedy takes over. Like you get the scenes where you see that the zombies are slowly creeping into life. Like he goes and he's buying flowers, but just before that, like there's somebody like manically running down the street. And then you see the bit where like there's a guy after a pigeon when he's on the bus and there's somebody ill like go about to chomp its head, and then you can't see it anymore. And then when he's on the bus, there's like somebody who's like pretty much dead next to him, and they start having them all over. Like they start saying like, oh, these guys aren't in work at the moment, they're sick. And then at pretty much every place they go into, you hear something about, oh, they're sick. Like, and then obviously his mate at home, played by Peter Serafinowicz, or I forgot to pronounce that probably, but great comedian. He says like almost everyone at my work is off. I'm having to cover for everyone. And I got bit by some crackheads. And then even when he meets her friend, which is one bit that I love, is that you have like all the cars lined up and a guy like dead at the wheel, and they're having that conversation about life. And obviously you get the bit where he's like, oh, how are you doing? He's like, oh, surviving. And you get glad to see somebody made it. And you get that thing of like coming in. But one thing that I love is that because she reappears kind of throughout the film. And it's this thing of like, it helps you to feel like there's other people going through this. You don't just get like, you're not just following Shaun. You can almost imagine like another film. And one of the things that like way before, like this is when the internet was kind of still, for general people, still kicking off. There was always the rumour that it's still a newborn for us. There was always the rumour that they were making a film about his friend, from their side, and then you were going to see like crossover with Shaun. And then there was always like, in the deleted scenes, like you see more about them and you see like how they die and stuff. But I always like that there's another story happening alongside that's running parallel.
And to be fair, that scene is very funny because that literally is just like a lineup of British. If anything, to be honest, the other side are now the bigger stars of all of them. It's
Tamsin Greig.
Martin
Freeman, the
Reese
Smith, Matt Lucas
at the back there. I think the only one I don't really notice is whoever played the other version of the mum was the only one I didn't.
I don't know. Apart from that, Tamsin Greig was one that really threw me off guard because I knew that Reese Shearsmith was in it. Because he's in the other two. Obviously, Martin Freeman was in The Office at the time. Lucy Smith, I think it is, was
also in that. There's all connection between it. You've got either people from The Office, you've got either people, and also people from a lot of the Channel 4 comedies. You've got several from Spaced, obviously, because Nick Frost was in Space. So why am I blanking on her name? The other the woman who plays Liz. The one who plays basically, who's meant to be Shaun's opposite. The one you meet throughout the film.
I can't remember her name either.
I'm blanking on her name. Which is bad, but she was in like the Royal Family Space. She's been in loads of stuff. Like with each of those,
and then Dermot. I keep wanting to say Dermot O'Leary.
Dermot. Again, I'm now blanking on his name, but he was like Black Books.
Black Books.
So that was Tamsin Greig and him who were in that together, and like each of those shows, like around that time, like lots of links between each other's comedy. It's almost as if they basically went like, well, you be in it, I know you from Channel 4, I know you from that, you're in it, any chance you can get Mark Freeman to join that? But this is still around the time before any of them like went like big like if you think about it, like like Martin Freeman, it wasn't until like Sherlock about 5 years later when he really got big.
Well, he was Tim.
Then
he was Tim from The Office, wasn't he?
That's what I mean. But then a lot of them were like in that stuff, but then didn't like. It took a while for them to go. Like even with The Office, like he didn't like shoot to stardom. He got extra gigs and stuff, but he didn't like shoot up. And a lot of them didn't until they did like some of the bigger stuff like a while later, or some of them it was even like 10 years later before it kicked off. And some of them who were bigger at the time and are actually less now. Like Dermot, he was deemed to be like one of the, he was thought it was going to be huge, and then he kind of. Like I think he struggles himself, so he wasn't as big as they thought. And even Lucy Davis, they thought out of all of them, they thought she would be probably the big. And then she has done American stuff, and she was in Wonder Woman and stuff like that. So she hasn't done badly. I'm just saying, like I don't think she was quite as big as people thought she was going to be at the time. It's so like it's just cool seeing like all of those like actors together in that scene and knowing. Kind of where they went at the time, because they were recognizable at the time. But it's also so funny the fact that they make like they're literally not the opposite, like literally they are the male counterparts of each other going past each other. It's so fun. I mean, I think right up to the icing on the cake when it is Matt Lucas and Nick Frost just in that perfect like
on their phones. But there was something that went over my head, which because like we could talk about every scene,
I think we've got a love of this film, but this isn't one where we're going to talk in order. And I think if you're listening to this, I assume you've seen this lots of times, like we have. If you're British, you definitely have. I feel like you can't 100%. Escape it in Britain. It might be newer to you if you're international and stuff like that. So it's But for us in Britain, this, as I said, this is literally probably on TV every week.
Yeah. And then, but there was one thing that I didn't realise this time. You know, I didn't realise however many times I've watched this, and I only picked up now. But it's when Liz breaks up with Shaun, and they're in the Winchester, and he's like, the plan for tomorrow. And then he says, you know, like, we start off with a Bloody Mary, then a bite at the king's head, then a couple at the little princess, and then back at the bar for shots. You know, and
I read this online because I'd never heard that theory before, and I read this online before we did this, and I was like, oh, that's really clever. And
then I was watching it, and I was like, when he said that, I paused it and had to go back, and I wrote it down. And I was like, Bloody Mary, obviously Mary.
Who's the lady? Who's the first?
Yeah, the first.
Because there's a comic book that they did at the same time, and it's basically of the story of Mary.
Oh, really?
The day before, how she ends up in the garden.
Yeah.
So basically, what happens to Mary before they made like their own little comic book, and it was just about that character Mary. What was her life like the day before? Kind of showing more like the day to day of what it was like in the shop. Yeah, like what it's like from going to the shop into there to get in there. So yeah.
How did she end up in the back garden?
I can't remember. That would have been good to find out.
It would have been good to find out. You failed.
There you go. I found out that.
Well,
there you go.
Failed.
I had that. I've got some other ones for some
You're
other
always
characters.
the researcher.
I've got some other plot holes.
You're always the researcher.
I was going to say I knew of the comic book, but I haven't actually read the comic book. But yeah, she goes from there to she goes from shop. I don't know. She gets a bit, and then she ends up in the garden.
There you go. Bite at the king's head is obviously Philip. Yeah. I couldn't figure out couple at the little princess. And
that's
then
David and Di.
That's David and Di at Liz's, but it's only when I think I had to Google that because I was like, I thought, and this is me just being a fucking goon, but I thought I was like, oh my god, I've cracked it. It's the two like fat biker lads.
Yeah,
you know, and I was like, but that's a couple, right? And I thought it was a couple of the little princes.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, there's the prince somehow. Maybe that's the biker gang. And then I was like, what? Just Googled it, and it was much more obvious.
And then the last
is
one more
back at the bar for shots.
Back
you
at
know,
the bar for shot, yeah.
where they get the shot
down at the end. Yeah.
But it's that thing of like one of the reasons why I find that the Cornetto Trilogy are so rewatchable is because every time you watch it, you'll pick up on something that you didn't pick up.
Yeah. I mean, this is what I think it helps more with these ones. I mean, I find that with pretty much any Edgar Wright film, there is just so many little things he puts in there. But these ones are even more. The Cornetto Trilogy are even more because it's him and Simon Pegg and some of Nick Frost, I think, in there as well. But obviously, those two together have such a such a cultural brain.
Yeah.
Though that they just know about, like, they just are those people. They are literally the guys that grew up, watched Star Wars, watched TV shows, watched horror films, watched this. They watched all that stuff. They read comic books. They read books. They were just the nerds at school that turned into the guys that had the power to go, I know all of this stuff. You know this stuff. We've spent all of our life basically reading this. We can just, that would be cool if we added that in or that reference in or things like that. And that's why, for the most part, even though each one in the Cornetto Trilogy is different in its own way, it just, each one had its own stuff that just makes it, you want to know more of certain things, or you want to spot if something's in there, and you want to, and it's also, helped by the fact that they're all funny.
Yeah,
they're all funny, and they're all good action or horror in their own way that they work. There's my personal favourite, Hot Fuzz is my personal favourite because I just like the slasher. I like slasher, and I think it does a whole slasher with a little bit of like a Final Destination kind of style to it in there.
Yeah,
I like the mystery of that one. World's End I think is good as well. I don't like it.
I think that's my favourite. Really? I think that's my favourite, but I think Hot Fuzz is the best. I think
Hot Fuzz is because they had the money. I think they were able to make a really structurally kind of sound, and also I think again because that one's meant to be based like near us, it's Gloucester, isn't
Gloucester boys.
It's a proper. There's a kind of a love letter to action films in that one, like it's a love letter to slasher and action films.
Yeah.
That kind of thing that I just really like. It really works really well. Whereas this one is that love letter to zombie films and to your classic horror kind of things. I think the only reason I don't like World End, I just didn't find that World End felt as consistent. Like it didn't feel like the story played out as consistently. Like I just didn't think all of it seemed quite as clear cut as it did with Hot Fuzz and Shaun the Dead. It seemed I really thought out in the first two, and the last one felt a little bit more, I don't know, round the edges a little bit thin. But then the last one's the least horror of the bunch.
It's more sci-fi.
Yeah. I'd say that even though the first two had quite major horror elements, the last one's not really a horror.
It's more body snatchers,
It's the closest to that. It's like Body Snatchers or They Live or so.
And that's why I think I like
that. So it's still just about I still would put it in, and I still would do the whole trilogy on this podcast.
Yeah, we will.
But yeah, that's my preference currently. But I might change my mind because I've watched World's End way less than I've watched Hot Fuzz and things.
Yeah.
Because Shaun the Dead loads. Hot Fuzz was also still within that period where I actually saw that in the cinema. And then watched it on DVD, and then it's on TV, and again I've watched it a million times. I think World's End I've only watched a couple of times. So. Yeah,
I mean I think World's End I think I like the themes and the actual story more, and I think I like the. I really like the kind of like small town paranoia things and what they will vibe to it. You know, I think it just real resonates with me. But I kind of Bill Nye always I think we were talking about we were actually talking about Bill Nye when we spoke about the first Omen.
Yeah.
And we were like, he's one of those people who's just always been old. Because even in this film, he looks old.
He looks older.
He looks older.
He looks older in this film 20 years ago than he does in the first Omen. Like he's had a glow up. I think at the time. I think the fame allows him
a little sun.
You naturally get a plumpness when you become famous, which could be chemicals of some kind. But I feel like there's a natural like my body is endued with power now. I have this power. I love him in this film, and he is that kind of great epitome of like an old man. And this isn't a First Omen. In First Omen, he seemed somewhat out of place, and it didn't really match it, and it didn't. It seemed like they didn't really know what they wanted to do with him. This one, he is perfect deadpan.
He's deadpan, and he's like he's in it enough, you know.
Yeah.
When he's like I've been bitten, you know, and then he's like we need to call the ambulance. Like, you don't need to call an ambulance. I run it under a cold tap. And I was just like, that's it. Like, I just run under a cold tap.
He is a classic, and classic, like almost the British kind of dad of the time. Like, the older sensibility. Like, you don't do that. Not necessarily like our dad's generation, but the generations before that, or their dads.
Yeah,
they were very. That was very much like you do that yourself. You need an electrical engineer to fix this house. No, you fucking don't. I'll build that myself with my hands.
That's genuinely like my granddad.
Yeah.
My dad was telling me this story once where, like, my granddad had come down from Lancashire and he was staying, and for some reason he just decided. My dad didn't ask him. He just decided to clean the pond. He just took all of the fish out, scrubbed it down, and just did it by himself. Not asked. He just looked at it and was like, "Oh, that needs doing."
Yeah.
And he's just that kind of thing of like, "Nah, you don't do that." I ran it under a cold tap. You know, like I've been bitten. It's a global pandemic, and he's like, "It's a cold tap."
Yeah.
You know, and then he's just like, "Oh, it's a bunch of like druggies or something like that." You know.
Yeah, they were a good generation. They just got on with shit.
Yeah.
We have been ruined by television. We've been ruined by all this DVDs streaming. All the stuff we're talking about.
Porn.
This is our love. You
Porn.
Know? They had all their love was the fact they got to go out and play all day, and we still did.
Yeah, we still
got that. It's too bad for any extra generations because they're like stuck to everything. But we got a nice mix, I think. But they were the get up and go generation. Not them boomers. You fucked us boomers.
the silent generation.
Yeah,
you know, horrid trauma. And
they got serious things. They're half their friends and family were like died in while they were still young children.
Yeah,
you know
but just drink the pain away, man.
Yeah, you
have 10 pints a night and you'll be fine.
They're gonna die in their 60s, but they enjoyed life while it was because they bottled it all up inside.
And they smoked cigarettes when they were 10.
Yeah,
it was fine. But
exactly. That was healthy back then. The doctor would give you
cigarettes.
An apple a day and a pack of six.
Yeah, that's what you wanted, man. But yeah, I love Philip.
Yeah, he's really good in this, and enough, and you get enough of their relationship scattered throughout that you do. I think you do generally feel bad when Shaun kind of realizes that he's been a bit of a dick, and it's what makes this film work is the fact that generally we can agree that for a good portion and for most of the time Shaun is a bit of a dick.
Well,
he's not a perfect person, and that's what makes it interesting.
He's not, but I realised this, I realised that, and as it was like as I was watching it, it was almost like a Frank Reynolds "I get it" moment.
Yeah.
Where at the start of the film, he's not got he can't get his life together. He's robbing Peter to pay Paul. He's giving the flowers that he's supposed to give to his mum to Liz. He forgets about the restaurant, and he's just fucking everything up. And then by the time it gets to the Winchester, and there's that scene where David's freaking out and he's like, "There's your fucking pork scratchings," and he catches them. I was like, man, his character growth, is so well done, But there's still so much kind of humor, and there's still bits where he feels like an idiot, when they get ambushed by a zombie. And they throw him the thing with the tennis ball on. And they hit him, and he fucking whomps on the head, and then realizes it doesn't do anything. He still does these little idiot things, but his growth is so well.
I think it does. I think it does show. We do know that he's not a complete he is kind of the character that never lived up to potential. And that's kind of what he is.
Yeah.
That's what he is in the film. He's not quite there. You know what I mean? He's the one. He's not completely, because he's the older dude that works at the shop. That works in an electrical shop.
Say he's an older dude. But he's 29.
No, that's what. But he's older because of all the rest of them are bloody 16, 17, 18.
Yeah.
But he's the older dude that works at the shop. He's the dude that just kind of he kind of got comfortable and settled for what he had and never tried to outgrow it, and now it's becoming a problem. He's reaching that level of adolescence when people expect you to, which not necessarily it should be, but people expect you to suddenly go, "Oh, you should be hitting that next stage now."
Well, I'm an adult.
Well, that's kind of where we are, or
you should,
or just around, or just past.
You should know what you're doing.
You should have this, you should have this career, or you should be settled out. You should live by yourself by this point. You should be, all these tags and labels that say should things that are just kind of bollocks kind
society
of thing. You go in your own way, but sometimes for the best, sometimes you become an absolute pig and you don't realise it. But those kind of things, and he's that character that's there. He does things that are a little bit kind of that's what I'm saying. He's a bit dickish at the beginning, that kind of part doesn't think, but he does so show signs of potential. He is still the one that's somewhat compared to Ed.
Oh yeah,
he's the comparison of he's somewhat together in his life. He's somewhat kind of got it together. He is the guy that when the manager's not in, he is the next one to go to. Yes, because of seniority, because it's been there so long, but also at the same time because there is something there. There's little bits of reliability, and there's a reason when he takes control, everyone is kind of well, yeah, I guess so. No one else is trying to take control, kind of thing. And he's
leader by default, isn't
it? Yeah, and he takes it, but he takes it on, and he shows that he's got that potential. It's just no one's ever really he's never really had a reason to show it that much.
Yeah.
And he does take that on. He still fucks up. Because it's natural and what works for the comedy and the story. And he just still doesn't think things through, and again, his plan doesn't really work out. It still doesn't, and he is that adolescent. I believe that's the story. I think I read Edgar Wright. So Edgar Wright originally wasn't so much of a comedy kind of story. He wanted to tell the story of an adolescent in the middle of an apocalypse, basically.
Okay.
That's what he wanted to do. And then he discussed it back and forth anyway with Simon Pegg and stuff like that. And kind of over time they kind of brought it closer to the space kind of sensibilities that they had, and where that idea had come from that episode. And they were like, I think... So Edgar Wright already had an inkling of an idea before it even developed more, and they were like, that's more of the idea, what we should do. That we should do it more like that kind of thing. And I think Simon Pegg helped to kind of flesh it out into more of the kind of the comedy, the loser, the sad sack kind of character that you can have at times. And help kind of build that from just being... So I think Edgar Wright might have been, as the budding director, might want to go slightly more serious originally, and then realised that actually... this is what we need. Like this is actually the what makes sense in terms of this kind of film and having these characters. But he said that another really cool that I really like about this film is that whole obliviousness to everything, like for a lot of the film.
Yeah.
The fact they don't notice it, and even when things are happening, they still don't notice certain things that are going on around them. And I think Edgar Wright said that he was inspired basically by himself, because when it was hand, foot, and mouth, was it hand, foot, and mouth?
Foot and mouth.
Yeah, foot and mouth disease. Which was had a major kind of part to it. But he was like, this was before the internet and stuff like that. So if you didn't pay attention to the news and see it, and if you weren't greatly in groups or in offices where people would be talking about these kind of things, it would just pass you by. It's like saying it's like the people that disconnect things and said that they basically didn't realise COVID was a thing for a good while because they weren't really in community, or they would just go about doing things. And you had a lot of people, we were well aware, but I think we've got friends who were a bit more why is this suddenly happening? It's not suddenly happening. They've been talking about it for fucking months, mate.
Yeah.
This has been building for a long time. I know it was blindsiding that it suddenly did happen. And you never expected it to happen with COVID and things like that. But there were still people that were kind of hit, and they were saying, "What the fuck do you mean I'm not going out of my house? This is what? This has only happened last week, didn't it? It's it's literally been months."
I remember hearing about COVID in January.
Yeah.
December, January, hearing about it and being and I was
something about a bat.
something about some laddie in a bat, and I was I was oh mate, we'll be fine,
Yeah.
But then
there's no chance. It's that would never happen. There's no and it still is weird now. That would never happen. But even locking people down.
But even foot and mouth disease.
That was growing quite a bit, and you forget how big that was. That was close to pandemic level at one point. It was I believe. I
mean, we would have been 10, 11.
It would have been. It was.
But I remember the only time I ever saw it was I was watching BBC one time, and I just remember them showing a field with a bunch of cows in it.
Yeah.
And they were talking about mad cow disease and foot and mouth, and I was thinking what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
And then
related to animals, but there was this question of basically spreading across, and bird flu as well, being, oh my god, could humans get that? Could it become that? And how would that because in that way? And all those all those pandemics that kind of came and went.
But it's true. If you're slightly detached from it, then you because I only remember watching it on TV. I don't remember anybody talking about foot and mouth. You know?
And it's what makes this film, the brilliance of it is that obliviousness. It literally is a really good idea that was there. What if you were in the middle of what already is an apocalypse, and you're just, because you can clearly see on the screens, on the news and stuff, they flick past it, but all the news were going on constantly about these things, but they just weren't paying attention. They're talking about that, or it was on TV and they're too busy rolling a cigarette to be I'm not what else is on, what's the next channel. They were just flicking past it, and then even when it gets to the point when it's on every single channel, it's not until they literally have Bloody Mary in the thing that they go on and go, what the fuck's this?
And what's going on? There's a level of
it's not that bad.
Not that it's not that bad, but there's a level of maybe we're the only ones experiencing this, because they call the police and they're it's engaged, and then they call and it's he's call an ambulance. It's it's engaged, you know, and it's almost if you were in that situation where there was a zombie in your back garden, you probably wouldn't be oh, I'm just going to call the police, you know. I'm going to call the police and log it. You'd be fucking bolting it.
You'd be out of it.
There's a slow lackadaisical
there is.
Are they still there? What should we do? Put the kettle on, you know?
Yeah, there's that, and a lot of the comedy comes from that slow realisation, that slow moment, the moment when they drive over the guy and they're waiting.
Yeah.
Oh shit! There's that difference between suddenly it's their mind is clear, oh yeah, there's a difference between have I run a normal guy over or is it zombie? And then obviously they only don't use that term very often in the film, but and then he finally for thank fuck.
And that's what I was saying earlier. It seems to lead it builds a slice of life, and then you have creepiness in the background of them kind of noticing, but then once the surreal hits, that's when it really leans into the comedy. It's not like a scary film. I felt there was some the moments that particularly creeped me out were the guy running down the street, the woman in the park, the hand on the door. You know, he's like, so what if you break it? It's not the end of the world. The hand on the door, and it's like boom. You know, and then the bit where the people are kissing outside, and then his head falls back. Those 4 things creeped me out. And I was like, I forget how creepy it is.
I think also the when they come out of the pub with the moaning guy in the distance in the dark and the shadow, because it's then played for comedy.
Yeah.
But at first it's who's that approaching from the darkness, and like really nicely shot, really like creepy, like horror look. And then obviously it's played for and they are like, that's the genius of it, the way that they are jumping off of those moments. They're taking like what would happen in a zombie apocalypse and then twisting it in the way of like, yeah, but why is that funny? Like, why would that be funny? Like, well, how could we take that? And you're right. What does help is that moment where it's like, we as the audience also don't know where this is quite going, I think. Yeah. And so therefore they play it up a little bit more horror to have a little bit, not full on, but you know, that those little moments that kind of tease this, so that when it does play horror, it almost feels like a weird like relief in some way that actually we're going this way with it, are we? But all of the special effects and stuff still play for horror, and sometimes full on gory horror. Yeah. You know, in the case of certain characters, it's a proper, you know, it wouldn't be out of space in a Romero film. You know, well, it literally is a Romero.
It's a homage, isn't it? You know. Well, I mean, where should we jump to now? Because we've kind of.
I mean, yeah. So we got this part. I feel like obviously it's time to go to the Winchester.
Have a pint, wait for it all to blow over.
Yeah, that's kind of where the majority of the stuff kind of.
And that's another bit of the foreshadowing is when they go, you know, stagger back to the Winchester, and then they all pretend to be zombies, you know.
Yeah.
And it's that
little stagger back to the Winchester. Yeah, all of that, like, foreboding and foreshadowing of where that's going to go, and also, you know, the little things like the things they mention to, like the shotgun above the bar, and you know, all those little hints of just like, oh yeah, it does, and they can't, and
the Winchester rifle above, dogs can't look up.
Or who that lady is in the bar and stuff like that, who then later on is the zombie that's coming towards it, you know, who's a spell of doom that might be coming, you know, all those little like characters that then you're like, this is now coming to play. They're all dead now and they're coming after you. And I like there are lots of little scenes, and then there are fun things which I completely forgot existed. Was the on the DVD it had plot holes. Okay. So they did. So I've seen all of them before, but I went back and rewatched them because it said, I was looking at like things I didn't know about Shaun the Dead, and it said about that it tells you about Diane. Is it Lucy Davis's Diane?
Yeah, I know that she survives.
And Shaun and Ed. Yeah. So when Shaun, so the first one is, you know, when they go into the Winchester, it kind of fails. When they're acting as zombies, they get to the door and they can't get in. And they're like, shit, what are we going to do? Like, they're all starting to notice us. It's not working. It's not working. And then obviously David, being a bit of a dick, kind of just like thinks he's being like heroic by throwing it in, but it's like, now you've really fucked us. So then Shaun obviously then runs off, but you don't follow Shaun, you follow them sneak in, you don't follow there. So that was like plot hole number 1. So basically Shaun kind of like, it basically tells you how he kind of did it. He does like a lap around, but then realises how fucking slow they are. So he then stands there for several minutes while he lets them catch up so they don't turn back around. So it's quite a funny little kind of, it's like a 1 minute or 2 like comic strip story that tells you like, he waited there for a minute, and then when he realised, he runs again, then he realised they're not going to catch him up, he goes and hides in a bin, basically, for a couple of minutes, and then goes off from there. And then he just sneaks his way back round, and that's how he arrived back in the pub again. So it's like they thought through all of these parts. They were like, we're not going to include that in the film because there's no reason. It's such a little thing. But, you know, it plays out as a comedy bit. And then you've got Diane's. Yeah. So obviously, you know, kind of jump into that part. But obviously when David dies and gets the classic Romero Day of the Dead.
Yeah, Captain Rhodes' death.
Yeah, he gets Captain Rhodes' death and gets pulled apart, and it looks so cool when he dies. Awesome. You know, his guts and the other organs all being pulled apart, And the assumption, obviously, within the film is that Diane died because Diane takes his leg and starts bashing her way through, the bodies and like running out. And you're like, there's no way you didn't get surrounded then and eaten. Yeah. And it doesn't actually tell you, and you don't hear a scream or anything like that. You just assume she died in the horde. What it basically says is she manages to bash her way through the horde, and then which you can actually see that there's basically a high tree that's just outside, and she climbs up the tree.
Yeah, I heard this.
And she outweights the whole she outweights them all coming, and she falls asleep in the tree. Well, before that, actually, it says she eats David's leg. So she starts eating David's leg to survive.
Yeah.
So while she's waiting out, literally, because it says when she wakes up, it's a thing. But apparently, she's waiting in the tree. She gets a bit hungry or something like that. She's like, she's starved because she hasn't eaten throughout the day or something. So she starts nibbling at David's leg. So there's a cannibalism there. And then finally, they're just kind of homaging to other kind of stories, aren't they? Zombie stories. And then finally she falls asleep on the tree, wakes up, and basically they're all gone. Everything's gone. The Winchester's burnt down to the ground. And now apparently I think it says she lives like in Bristol with her aunt. So that's it. Still keeps in contact with Shaun and things. So it's one of those little things. And then finally there's the plot hole of how did Ed get from the cellar at the end into the thing, which is pretty much Shaun comes back thinking that he's dead and he's going to be gone, and thinking that his body would have been taken by the army at the end or destroyed or killed, but he finds that Ed is still alive, and basically he uses his body as a way to get Ed to follow him, and then he trains him over time in the shed to start to do things. After a while he said he stopped trying to eat him and things like that, and it's just nice little parts. So if you've got the DVD or go onto YouTube, you can see the little plot holes. But I forgot about it. The Diane one is the interesting one.
I always remember the Diane one because I heard that one.
Because it tells you that a character actually lived beyond there, which again you just assume in the context of the film, there's no way she survived jumping because she literally jumps into the whole crowd. You just think you've been bitten at least in seconds. But then again, Shaun does the same thing. He jumps in literally into the middle of a crowd when he's escaping around that, to get distracted. And you think he gets grabbed onto, pulled onto, held onto. He manages to push his way through, but you're like, you could have been bitten so easily in that moment. Yeah, it could have happened that way. So again, we're not staying very linear with these things.
No, we never do.
With these,
never do.
We never do, but we normally stay in the order of the film, but we've kind of just glossed because we don't need to talk about every part of this film.
No.
There are lots of highs and lows. There are lots of sad, the mum's death is kind of,
the
you
mum's
see it
death
coming and you recognise it. But out of all of the ones, although she has an occasional scene or two, the mum actually is the one I remember it just doesn't quite work. I also learned that apparently Helen Mirren was offered that role, but said that she didn't want to play basically what is just an old mum character.
I felt there
wasn't much to her character.
No, I felt that the mum was much ditzier than I remember her being. She was really fucking.
Yeah, she's really just she's really just unclear the whole time in what's going on, and
but I don't think she's
not as well
fleshed
old. Out as the rest of the characters.
No, I don't think she's supposed to be that old.
Yeah,
she's supposed to be like.
Well, they're not that old. Again, Bill Nye is fucking 20 years later. Bill Nye's still going. What's Bill Nye now? Maybe 70s?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're only being their 50s or something like that kind of thing. It's not that
They're
old.
not whereas the mum is walking around like she's fucking senile.
Yeah. Obviously, after she's bitten, that's because she's worried, but even before that, she's still very
But when they stumble into that garden and she's like, oh, I think Marvin and Doris
and just walks off
and then there's the shot of the clearly fucking zombified guy in his bathrobe banging on the door, and she looks at him as if he's still not a zombie, and I'm thinking
if somehow he got out, kind of
somehow he got out. I think
she's in shock or something. I
think the impression is that she let him out.
I mean, because the glass isn't broken or anything like that. So I believe she did. She went up to the door and must have let him in, which is just a...
But she's not 90. If she was 90 years old, I'd be it's senile, mate.
It's that I think it's because they play it basically as her husband just died and things like that. she's in shock and she's not really making good decisions.
Maybe
she's not really clear. I don't think her mind is not really allowing her to see what's going on. I think she's that character that doesn't really understand what's happening right now. And I think that's where the senileness comes from, because she's kind of like in a major stage of shock.
Maybe that
I do get it, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with the performance. I just think out of all of them, it's definitely the weakest written character. There's just not much to it. She has one or two bits that kind of add to the humour of the scene, you know, like when it's the dad in the car and he's turning it off, and she's like, what do you mean? Like, he's not dead, he's still right there. And it's like, oh shit, you know, all of them rushing out of the car like, Jesus Christ. You know, all those bits, you know, like, I love that. Like, he turns off the radio.
That's so good, yeah.
Like, the shitty music.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's definitely the weakest of that. But, you know, obviously for Shaun's character, he goes through quite a lot of loss within that scene of the film. We've already talked about the Queen one. It's a banging scene, you know, when they're fighting. I love the bit when Diane gets the darts and starts to lobs them and misses, and then it's like, and then hits one in the side of the zombie's arm, and Shaun's like, yes, straight into the side of his head. No.
But I love to see a scene before that when they're like sat around in the darkness, and he's just like, would anybody like a peanut? Yeah, you know. And then he goes and he's like, I'll put the TV on. You know, and we see that bit where like
when he turns on the power box and the lights turn to the side.
Lights turn on. All the zombies stood out, and it's real creepy. And you're like, and then that
is a proper creepy scene as well. To suddenly be, we've got like safe. One glass window, and you can see them all like pressed against it. Like there's tons of them, and then you hear all the doors in the basement start to go. That is one of the ones that is proper like doing the suspenseful horror well.
Yeah, and then when he goes back, it's that thing of like, fuck, like none of them know that they're just surrounded, you know.
Yeah, and the look on his face is both like natural like creepiness and somewhat humorous, like the way that he just looks
so like destroyed, like his fucking plan.
Yeah, everything's fucked. Like how do we?
He's got that fucking Kurt Angle meme look, hasn't he? You know, it's like it's just fucked.
Yeah,
like your whole plan. He's like, you thought you gave them the slip, you know?
Yeah,
because even before he's real like, I just gave them the slip, didn't I?
Yeah,
you know?
I think that's what that plot hole that I said about before, when he takes them down the alley to the Vin. I think he avoids them, but basically where he's led them. So when they do realise where he was, or follow his son, or whatever they do, it's basically leading them down the back of the pub. Is what he's done. So he hasn't really avoided them.
No,
he's just managed to get back into the pub, but doesn't realise that actually if they start to go the direction that he did after a while, they'll end up back at the pub and therefore end up in the basement like they do at the end.
Well, I like that thing of you know, in Dawn of the Dead, it's very much like in the lives they go to, like in death they go to where they like remember, and in America they all go to the mall, and in the UK they all just go to the fucking boozer.
We all go to the pub.
We all go to the battle cruiser.
Yeah, I mean that is it, and that is the nice like Dawn of the Dead homage there, like, because out of all of them, obviously we've got links across, but I think Dawn of the Dead is possibly the most inspiration. And that's what I like. I like the idea, you know, they take that consumerism and stuff like that, and they take it. What would it be for Britain? It's the pub. You're gonna head down the pub.
It's gonna go to the pub. Yeah.
Which to be fair, that's way better than the mall. I was about to say spend less money, but no, you don't.
Definitely. Well, in a zombie
not if you're in a proper fit. Yeah. In a zombie apocalypse,
you just get steaming.
I mean that's all. That's where we'll all head. If we'll all give it a try, see what works. I mean, that's not true. We've already said it. I think boat.
Yeah, we said boat a long time. We've had many conversations.
Boat/supplies.
That was the plan we made about 15 years ago.
And I'm sure just like any other zombie film that would go terribly wrong. And then again, Dawn of the Dead proved to us that that's not always a good option.
Nah, I'm sure it'll be fine for us, man. It'll be fine for us.
We just live out at sea or die at sea.
So you get you get the scene where like they all start to kind of break in. Don't Stop Me Now starts playing. We said that's a fucking
They've
classic.
all got they all start to gather their own like items, like they're going from on top of the bar, one of the legs off the pool table, or whatever, like those kind of different legs off the tables, you know, pool cues, broken ones, you know, glasses, bottles, you know, they're all holding like different items to try and fight and bash. And when the zombies start properly pouring after David's, it's open
it's
season.
All going in.
They all start coming out, and then they start bursting out of the bar, and they're all trying to hide, and it's you know, for something that builds up with a comedy, it doesn't shy away from the fact that, you know, most of the time in a zombie film, sadly, it's got quite a tragic and dire ending.
Yeah.
You know, it normally ends, and especially when you're talking about Romero ones.
Yeah.
You know, normally it's a character or two, or very few that get out. You know, we've got all of our references. You know, you've got your classic. You know, the Shaun like zombified. You know, that we said at the beginning, like where he comes out. You know, you have that shot twice in the film. You know, when he's yawning and
yawning,
you know, that's a classic to the original shot of Night of the Living Dead when you first see that zombie, and it's that. You know, it's that pose that they do in Night of the Living Dead. They do it a lot. They do it in all of the Romero, but obviously Night of the Living Dead being the first, you know, they had that very shot, and it's got all the scenes like obviously his mum Barbara, you know, and all the different characters having names that are related within that universe. And it just shows all that, but it just also has this direness that you would expect in that film, where sadly you know that most of them are not going to make it out of this, and this whole ragtag bunch that come together. It's all about to end very badly. Just how many of them is it going to end badly for?
That's it, isn't it?
And then obviously, because I think, and it's probably something about, it's about the maturity. I think when I was younger, for instance, you know, Ed was probably the funniest fucking character on this planet. You know, he was the funniest thing. I think as you mature, you start to realise there's actually a real sadness to Ed as a character. You know, he's like this. Maybe it's the obliviousness or the fact that he's just not really that aware or bothered about things. But in some ways, you start to look at that as actually, even though he might not look at it like that, you start to look at it as a little bit like he doesn't quite realise that he's not really got much of a life. Like he's just kind of consumed by, you know, shit like weed and games, and that's all he does with his life. And you know, it's the kind of that, which some people I'm sure listening are like, that is life. You know, and sometimes that's a great life, but you know, that being your whole life, that has a little bit of a sad element to it. And it is that, and you know, so when you have obviously when he gets bitten and gets bitten several times, he gets all over, like he covered him. They're covering him, aren't they? It's probably because the one thing that obviously is nice, you know, is the Shaun and Ed's relationship is something that's built across the whole film.
It's real strong, and they do that. You know, Nick Frost and Simon Pegg have such a good chemistry together. Yeah, you know, the real kind of natural like two piece. You know,
which is really interesting considering you know that Simon Pegg was more actor drama school though, whereas Nick Frost came from nothing. He'd done like. Before Spaced, he'd done like a couple of sketches in one BBC show that got picked up. Yeah. And pretty much he owes it, Simon Pegg, because Simon Pegg, him and him became friends outside of the acting world. They weren't like from kids or anything like that, but they met each other, got that, and he ended up with something in Spaced, and that's pretty much all he had done before he did this. And then after that, think about how big they shot to become
they shot big.
You know, he went from, you know, obviously Hot Fuzz and stuff like that, but then they did Paul, and they did a whole, you know, and Nick Frost has built himself a whole consistent career now. He's constantly in stuff.
He did Ghost.
He's in a lot of British stuff.
Ghostwatch or something the other day. A couple of years ago.
I think he did that. I think he's in
Amazon
Prime. Now. He's constantly in British comedies now.
Yeah.
He hasn't gone abroad so much like Simon Pegg did, but he's just built himself a little world. You know, it's great. You know, and you know he's fantastic in this film in the different levels, and I can't really say anything bad about any of the cast, to be honest. I think everyone does a great job here. I don't think anyone lets it down. As I said, Barbara's I just think is a little bit more down to the writing, that there's just not that much more of them.
Yeah.
And I also think there's a little bit, you know, she has real moments, but I think that Liz isn't as quite always as great as I don't think she's like there or fleshed out enough again either. She's kind of is, but you know, I just think she kind of falls a little bit into the nagging girlfriend kind of area of what you'd expect. She comes back around by the end, I think. She does have an arc, you know, and it's not that... She just wants Shaun to grow up, you know, and that's it. But I just mean out of these kind of films, you tend to have someone who has to be the one who's kind of pushing someone, and the loss of him is what pushes him. She has her moments and she has things. I just don't think she shines as bright as a lot of the other ones do. Even like David and Diane, I think, have more like clear, funnier, or obvious moments than I think.
I think David's a good character. You know, I like the whole angle that he's secretly in love with Liz. If anything, I think that after, I think it's probably Diana who's I wouldn't say the weak link or anything like that, but the least interesting character, and the one in a way who's kind of given not as much to do. I think Lucy. I keep wanting to say Lucy Smith, but Lucy Davis. I think she plays her well, but I think because that's almost how the character that she's supposed to play, like she's kind of is a little bit like Dawn, you know?
Yeah.
In a strange way,
I think her character, but I think it's her character's meant to, like, her character kind of is like the.
That's what I mean. Her character's
she's not meant to be the, like, is she?
She's not very dominant.
She's meant to be like Liz is meant to be the superior. David's in love with Liz. You know, she's kind of just an add-on. Like she's that friend or whatever that someone met in university or something who just tags along to everything.
Yeah.
But when really, like, David actually liked her, but so David ended up with Liz because Diane because. They were just there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They were just there. And it's one of those things that tends to, like, you hear about quite a lot with, like, uni friends and stuff like that. There's the ones that were proper friends, and then there's maybe someone who somewhat always feels like they were the tag along or something.
They just turned up to everything.
You know, the ones that end up drifting apart after a while because they were like, we weren't really actually friends. I was just kind of there, wasn't I? We were just kind of there. You know, I mean, you guys had you guys were like friends for like years before we met, and I just kind of suddenly joined your group and I was there, and, you know. And that kind of goes like that kind of thing. It's that moment. But yeah, I can see it with Diane as well. I just think, yeah, it's just those parts of it, which I guess kind of speaks to the fact that actually maybe it's the women character not quite as strongly written as the male characters.
Maybe.
You know, not quite there. Just to pick some things apart in a film that I think, for the most part, I think is pretty much one of the best zombie films, like,
one of the modern ones,
modern. Not going with, full on, like, horror in that same way, but the concepts, the ideas, the way it uses Romero and stuff like that, you know, how smartly it's written, how well some of those shots are, like that tracking shot where it repeats again is just so good.
Yeah, and then
like,
and the fast kind of the fast editing shots.
Oh yeah, you've got that.
Became famous for, you know.
Well, yeah, because it's the what was it, John Woo? Is it the director John Woo, like Face Off, stuff like that? You know, they reference it all the time in Hot Fuzz.
Yeah.
But he's using that kind of style. He's using like an action style in a comedy horror film.
And it kind of became his signature. You know?
That
like,
fast
it's very synonymous with him.
Yeah. And he does use it across a lot of his other stuff that he's done as well. And, you know, the only one popped to mind right now is Scott Pilgrim, where it's constantly fast cut comic style, like works really well in that way. But yeah, it's a really good format, you know, for really good actor directors who on their debut, which is a fucking knockout of the park for them. Yeah. And it's why they shot to stardom around the world. You know, it wasn't like, this wasn't just a UK here, this was worldwide, you know what
I mean? It was insane, man.
I think it made like 30 million at the box office worldwide, which might seem really small, but when you made it for 6 million and it's a small British horror, which was only intended to be like a kind of British kind of release kind of one, it was one of the biggest hits since Four Weddings and a Funeral had become, you know, to make another British film that went from like, oh, this is just a little British film, to suddenly being like Jesus Christ and making like Hugh Grant like the biggest star in the world at the time. This is what it did for them, you know what I mean? Around the time of that to Hot Fuzz, the anticipation for the next film that these guys made together was huge.
Well,
and even, you know, and even bigger with World End, which is, I think, also was the detriment to World End a little bit, not for the quality of the film. Yeah. But people almost had too much expectation.
Maybe.
Because they made two back-to-backs absolute bangers. I think the third one couldn't live up to it, even though it's still a solid film.
Well, the budget for for Shaun of the Dead was 6 million and the box office was 38.7 million. But then if you... Hot Fuzz had a budget of 12 to 16 and went on to make nearly 81 million. And then... The World's End had a budget of 20 million, so the budget, you know, keeps going up. And yeah, it is. It's a relatively small budget, and it went on to be, you know, a very like important cultural film. I mean, if you think 2004, I think that was also the same year that 28 Days Later came out. I feel like it was the same year. They were very...
200 Days Later was like 2002, I think.
A little bit earlier, maybe?
Or 2021? No, 2002, 28 Days
2002, later. Okay. Yeah. But I mean, they were very close together. You had two kind of very distinct British zombie films that handled the content and the characters of zombies in two completely different ways that both went on to dominate and leave a massive cultural impact.
Yeah, huge.
Know? I will jump over to the social media lounge because we actually got a couple of things this time. So obviously, if you long time listener, you know that we put up what we're watching and we get you guys to kind of give us your thoughts. So the ones that we had this week, we had Cat Treadwell at Druid Cat, who said, I remember when this came out, living in London and how everyone loved it. But then I was on holiday in America when it dropped there, and every cab driver was talking to me about it because it was this crazy British zombie movie. It really made waves, and rightfully so. And then she wondered how they did with the British slang, because obviously that would have been something going on. And then Half Price Horror Podcast said, it's only when you read about the filming, which... There's a book called You've Got Red on You by Clark Collis, and it's you realise that it was absolutely meticulously planned, and that Wright was shooting his first feature with a veteran's touch, and you can see that, you know, when you look at the film, it is kind of incredibly well put together and thought out.
Oh yeah, it has a proper, you know, it showed that Wright had a clear almost like vision. An auteur's vision, I'd say. Like, he had a clear style, which, yes, taken from, like, other styles that he'd learned. But this guy must have memorised, must have watched films so much. Like, he was like, I know exactly what I need to do. Which is just, you don't get it with many first-time, like, proper, like, filmmakers for a feature film. Yeah. Where they come in with such a confidence to be that. And probably helped that it was more like a lower level that he could do it to his style. And,
yeah, probably.
You know, but it made the film feel bigger than it probably would have if it didn't have his touch.
Yeah. It's very distinct, man, you know.
But it was such a crazy, 2004, man. I mean, just looking like...
Yeah, what else do we have?
This is our thing. The kind of films about Scooby-Doo 2.
Classic.
Monsters Unleashed. Shrek 2 and The Incredibles, to talk about the kids' ones.
Yeah.
Van Helsing.
Oh, classic.
The Village. Okay, not such a great film, but, you know, it was around that.
I remember The Village not being as bad as everybody's saying.
Yeah, it's not as bad, but it's a bit dull. Hellboy was released, Blade Trinity, The Day After Tomorrow.
Your favourite film.
Collateral with Mr. Tom Cruise, Simon Pegg's best friend.
Yeah.
Spider-Man 2.
Oh, fucking big film.
Fucking a banging film. Yeah. So, so many... Oh, Catwoman, of course. The classic Halle Berry.
Yes.
Man on Fire, Denzel at his best.
Big Denzel.
You know, Series Unfortunate Events.
Lemony Snicket.
How about a bit of King Arthur starring your
yeah.
boy Ian Grufford, because I can't remember what the other guy's called.
What was his name? Clive Owen.
Clive Owen, there you go.
How the fuck was Clive Owen so big when he only did a few films and he wasn't great?
Dude was fucking, he was huge, even
but
though
how?
He was pretty much the same in everything he was in.
How? Because he did...
I mean, he still does stuff now. He's still in TV series and stuff now. I think he's got better over the years, but at that point, he would pretty much play the same character everything he was in.
Yeah.
Now, if he was King Arthur, some dude shooting in a gangster film or thing, he'd pretty much just sound like Clive Owen.
But he just, blew up.
Yeah, it just was one of those. It was like they just loved this one guy. Everyone was like, this guy's this, and he's going to be the next James Bond, and you know what I mean? It's like that blowout, and then he was going to be, and then they went with Daniel Craig, who at the time wasn't as big, but then until he went, boom, Daniel Craig instead, and then he replaced him.
Well, it's better than Clive Owen.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
he is a big Clive Owen. What kind of British man are you?
Yeah.
Clive Owen.
The classic British man.
He wants to be fucking Hugh Grant so bad. Yeah. And he wants to be the fucking other guy. Why is my brain gone? It's really late.
The other guy.
The other guy.
Craig.
No, not Daniel Craig. The other guy.
It's Brosnan. I don't know.
No, I mean, he does want to be Pierce Brosnan as well. Who doesn't? But the guy in fucking Bridget Jones.
Hugh Grant, Colin Firth.
I called him a sexual man a couple of podcasts ago. You know, he wants to be Colin Firth.
That's the worst. I was trying to think of Alien vs Predator was also like that, because I remember sneaking in to see that, snuck in to see that film. So all these it's a classic year of films where some people might not say that all of these are actually classics. They're just but we remember them because this is probably the peak of our period of really we were early teens. We were, 12, 13 odd. But this is really the stage, to be honest, when you actually properly remember stuff, to be honest. I feel like before that, you're somewhat remembering doing things, but you're not properly remembering.
Not proper.
This is when we actually, you're watching films and you actually properly started to remember
formative years,
these films. So, remembering, the fact of films I really enjoyed.
Getting a hard on over
like
Dracula's
National
Wife.
Treasure. And then also remembering, of course, a million erections every minute of the day. Things you'd love, or Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, beautiful. And then films like the one we're doing soon, which is also its 20th anniversary, Van Helsing,
best film
and
of all time.
Remembering that it's not that great.
Remember, it's the best film of all time, and you got hard every time you saw Dracula.
I was like, I have to tease this battle that is coming because
it's coming.
Yeah, I mean, I've literally have not seen it probably since about 2004. So Van Helsing at the time, even as a kid, I remember thinking this is kind of like Underworld or something like this. Is like real cheesy shit.
Don't put it in. Don't put it in there.
It's talking about this is like Resident Evil, Underworld, that level of.
Van Helsing was campy, fun. Underworld was emo cringe.
Yeah. I mean, that's why. I mean, I can't really say. I think I've seen part of an Underworld film and I thought it was absolutely diabolical.
Yeah, they were absolutely.
I pretty much thought the same of most Resident Evil films after the first two, maybe, where they were somewhat dealable. But
yeah,
that kind of really 2004. It was the kind of around that time. The early 2000s was the peak of making these kind of CGI, which now no longer holds up on these crappy things with basically no script and basically just going, you've got guns, you've got some kind of futuristic looking thing, or you've got some kind of lever. Go,
yeah, just
do it. Run, Kate Beckinsale, run.
Just act, yeah. Run, Kate Beckinsale.
That was basically it. That was the epitome of what some of those films were. And from my memory, that was what Van Helsing was.
Yeah, Van Helsing was.
I look forward to revisiting it. Yes. I mean, I like Hugh Jackman. I just remember most of it for me just didn't work. It just was weirdly it was like League of Gentlemen with Sean Connery. It was like that level of kind of film, whereas somewhat campy fun, but at the same time, I remember thinking, but it's also not good.
We'll see.
We'll battle it out. I might change my mind when we come back to that. That's another. I thought that might end up on a must-see horror, but apparently, no, Van Helsing didn't make it as that cut.
Never did this, though.
But it is 20th. Never did Shaun of the Dead. I was certain that this was on the must-see horror poster.
You will.
So, that is Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah. But, well, come and let us know your thoughts on Shaun of the Dead as it celebrates its 20th anniversary. Let us know how you rank the Cornetto Trilogy as well. Like we said, we will plan to cover all of them at some point and then give you our rankings. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at CMTH Podcast. Please remember to hit that subscribe button and leave us a lovely review. We will, we're just going to go for a couple of pints to the Winchester and wait for this whole thing to blow over. And we will see you next week. Take care. Goodbye.